If you're an aerialist struggling to figure out how to make an aerial act and how to make things flow from one thing to another, picking music, accentuating your movements, making it look professional, this is the video for you. My background is I have 8 years of aerial experience, I have 2 teaching certifications, and I have a plethora of performances under my belt, both within dance and within aerial. My dance background has definitely given me a little bit of a different perspective than what I think a lot of people get out of traditional circus classes. So the difference between aerial circus and aerial dance: circus style aerial is more focused on the skills and the tricks and the very flashy, showy things and like the muscle, and aerial dance is more flow-based and connecting one thing to another. Often these two things overlap, but to be able to pinpoint what's important to you in your act, whether you want those flashy tricks or if you want more flow, is going to be really important. There's some element of flow that you're going to want regardless, but sometimes you can make really simple movements look really professional just by having a really good flow and really good transitions. My first tip is to make sure that your movements make sense next to each other. So you don't want to have a movement that is completely unrelated to the next movement where it just looks choppy and you have to like shift and fidget yourself into the right position. So go with the path of least resistance when you're picking out the next move, and this is where it helps to have a larger aerial vocabulary. So if this is like way out of your ballpark and say you're a beginner aerialist making an act, I would definitely outsource for this and get help from an instructor that can help you with this. That's what I did for my first couple of acts, is I kind of got help from people who knew a little bit more than me and were more used to making acts like this. An example of this would be going from mermaid into angel and into cuddle. So those 3 movements link very well and they transition very well. So there's lots of things like that where there are variations of movements and things that you can do to kind of accentuate your movements that are going to help you go from one thing to another without looking like it's forced. So having that consistent flow, and this is something that's kind of a dance principle as well, you don't ever want to like stop between movements where it looks very robotic and choppy. You don't want to go, and here's my next pose, and shift again, here's my next pose. Like, it's very choppy if you do that. So if you can continue moving throughout each pose and making it nice and fluid, that's going to help so much. Another example of that would be like setting up. If you know you want to have like a really cool trick, like you know you want to have a mill circle or a mill wheel. Like, I know the terminology is super different depending on where you are in the world. If you want to have some kind of roll like that or like sort of drop situations, then you can definitely prep for that. So maybe you have a birdie where you have one leg on the hoop and you're coming out and coming forward, and then maybe you come back up and lower your hands and then you go into your roll. So just thinking about how to set up a movement that makes it not look choppy, so you're not just like, okay, I'm gonna get into my position and then I'm gonna do the really cool thing, because that is one of the things even an untrained eye is gonna notice if you're not flowing through your movement. So you can take, again, really simple movements and make them look good. There is a very clear difference between a novice doing very advanced tricks that maybe they can get away with doing, but they're not developed in their artistry or their technique, and someone who is very experienced and knows how to flow and knows how to move through and manipulate the hoop doing very basic movements. They're 2 different people. They have that fluidity. When I say fluidity, I'm not necessarily talking about a quality of movement, like a fluid movement or maybe graceful. That's not what I mean. You can have fluidity with any style, even if it's like there's more impact or it's more jarring at times, as long as there is a flow and as long as it connects. Next thing I'm gonna say is accentuating what you're doing with your hands and your feet. One of the big things that I see beginners doing is being very loose with their hands, or like kind of letting the hands hang, or be just kind of like jazz hands. So be really deliberate about, like, you can use your arm, and that's like, again, my ballet background coming in, and that's more of my style, where I like use the arm and I flow through the movement rather than just, you know, being like robotic about it. And again, this works for sharper movements too, where maybe you have more like jabby or like sharper movements that float together. So really use those hands and be deliberate about what you're doing with the hands. Repositioning them around the hoop in a deliberate way it's going to read a lot better than like if you seem like you don't know where to put your hands and you're constantly regripping. On that note, with regripping, you definitely want to make sure that your movement choices are making sense and are setting you up to grip in the right place. Like if you're going from move A to move B, you don't have to want to change your position 20 million times. Know exactly where you're going and set yourself up in a way that you are already there before you can go to that movement. That's going to help a ton. The next thing is I'm going to talk about pointing your toes, and I don't believe that you necessarily have to point your toes or have like these beautiful ballet lines. That is the aesthetic that I like, but that's not necessarily the right way, the wrong way. I think like the safety of it is the most important, but when we get into artistry, just make a deliberate choice about having your feet and your legs be active. So this doesn't have to be a long pointed toe ballet line, but maybe your movement is a little bit more, it calls for more flexed feet. But as long as you're engaged, that's what matters. So maybe this move you want flexed feet, or a little floint, so like a half point with your toes up a little bit. Be deliberate, whatever it is, even if it's not pointed toes. Me, if you watch my videos, I'm always pointing my toes for the most part. That is my active leg of choice. But again, that's not necessarily the right way to do things. That's just how I like to do it. Nothing gives away a beginner like floppy feet, floppy hands that just don't know what they're doing. So make sure your knees aren't bending where they're not supposed to bend. Your feet are making a choice and doing something very clearly, either pointing, flexing, flointing, whatever. And your hands are not just like, yeah, like I don't know what I'm doing with my hands, or regripping a ton. Next, don't force anything you're not 100% comfortable with. Don't ever put anything in your routine that you don't know and go, oh, I want to learn this move. I'm going to put it in there and I'm going to hopefully learn it by the time I have to perform. Never do that. Only do movements that you have trained and that you have like the back of your hand. So there's no question, no nerves. You're very confident that every time there's no failure. How we minimize risk is we know exactly what we're doing. And we've practiced it enough that our rate of failing that movement is very, very low. It's never zero. Like even as professionals, like they still can have a movement that they usually get 99% of the time, but then there's that 1% where it doesn't work. But you want to have something where it's not like, I can straddle 50% of the time, so I'm going to put it into my act, and then you have your performance and you can't straddle. So just make sure there are things that like you can do. Last part I'll touch on is stage presence. Now this is not something that can easily be learned overnight. This is something that, luckily thanks to my dance background, I already had a lot of, and it is always something that just kind of came naturally to me. So as teachers, when things come naturally to you, sometimes it's a little harder for you to teach them. I have struggled in many, many, many other areas, and I will 100% say that I am better at teaching the things that I struggled with because I can relate with them. And in general, I can relate with struggle. I do have a couple of tips. Taking anything that's going to help your creativity and your artistry, like dance, is going to help with your stage presence, but it's not a must. Like there's a lot of good aerialists that have beautiful stage presence that I've never danced ever. So I would definitely recommend, if you know dance is not your thing and that's not something you're interested in and you're like, girl, I already have too many hobbies, I get it. You don't have to do that. What you can do is watch videos of aerial performances and evaluate whether you think they have stage presence or not. And I want you to pay attention to what energy they're putting into their movements. You can always tell if someone is living in their movement or if they're just going through the motions. It's very clear when someone has stage presence because it's just this energy that you get. Like, not to get super woo on you, but it's true. You can tell when there's energy versus you're just there trying to get the job done, trying to do the motions. Facial expressions, generally someone with no stage presence is going to look like this. Or bored. Now, I'm not saying you have to smile the whole time because I also don't like that look. I think that hurts your cheeks and you can't really breathe like that. It just kind of looks silly if you're just smiling the whole time. You don't even have to smile at all. But use your face. A really good way to do this is picking the energy of your act, whether it's upbeat and happy or sad, and you're going to kind of embody that and you're going to accentuate with certain movements. Once you have your movements and your act down, you can start thinking about your face. If you're going to do a reach with your hand and you know you're reaching with your hand, you can follow with your gaze. Create interest. Also have a level of confidence, whether it's real or faked. Present confidence. I am by nature not a super confident person, but when I perform, everybody thinks I am. And really I'm shaking in my boots every single time. It never gets better for me. I am always so nervous for my performances. But I still find a way to fake it because I know it looks worse if you don't. So yeah, I could clam up and be like, oh no, I'm gonna be so bad. But then I'm definitely gonna be bad because people can tell when you're afraid to go all out. So really put your heart into it, go all out, go into it. And this is something you have to practice before you actually get on stage. The stage energy can definitely help you get excited and get into your stage presence, but don't rely on the stage alone when you practice. You want to practice your stage presence. Use your head, follow your hand, use your eyes to follow, have an expression that is in accordance with your act and the song, like your music choice, all of that, and change your expression as feels natural and as feels needed. Again, the natural part will come with time. The more you do it, the more you experiment with things. Acting classes could help too. I'm sure that people with an acting background definitely have a better time finding those facial expressions and being able to convey something they don't necessarily feel in real life. Like, okay, I need to play a character right now. So playing that character, figure out what character you're trying to embody, and find the facial expressions and the body movements that you want to convey with that. Those are the biggest tips that I have for stage presence. I am still myself working on the best ways to teach stage presence. If you've got anything to add to that, please let me know in the comments. Again, that's something I struggle with teaching because that's an area that comes a little bit more naturally to me. It's just a presence that you have to have. And I do believe it is something that can be learned, even if it doesn't come naturally to you. Let me know if you want to add anything to that or if you have any other questions about the act creation process. I do have another video on my channel about how to create an act step by step, where I go into more detail about the actual act creation process and not so much about the artistry or the professional quality of the act itself. This is more about like the ins and outs of the process, the full process start to finish of creating it. So if you're really full in that act creation process, definitely go check that one out too. It's going to be a great complement to this video.